Hey, hey, hey. Why do nations fail? Why do we have a pattern of history where nations implode on themselves? And what do you think of a universal basic income? Do you think it would solve a lot of problems, or do you think it would um, exacerbate a lot of problems? So, do you guys think a universal basic income would help? Let's say if every citizen at the age of 21 was given $10,000 a year, and this is your universal basic income. It's $10,000 a year. Once a month, it would get deposited into your account, and you can do with it what you may, and you're free to spend it however you like. Now, this would get rid of a lot of the bureaucracy that's causing so much debt in our government today. If you gave everybody at the age of 21 $10,000, it would uh, eliminate a lot of the administration, a lot of the bureaucracy, a lot of the clogged arteries of the government. That is part of the reason we're in so much debt, as there's so much bureaucracy and there's so much um, greed. Well, I don't know if you want to call it greed, but there's so much technical stuff that is the reason things are failing. I mean, society's failing. Uh, you know, in 1960, if the the amount of, if you look at family structure, if you take family structure in 1960 to 2010, completely changed. Um, I think something like only 52% of middle class, lower middle class, who make under, I think, I don't know, household income of 40,000 a year, get married now. That is a huge drop from 1960, where 86%, according to Charles Murray, 86% of families, young working class men at their prime, 86% were married with a kid. That's down to, I think, 52%, either 48% or 52% in 2010. It's probably even worse now. So part of that reason is because of the absence of jobs, stable jobs, good jobs, to where you have a stable future, to where you have benefits and stuff like that, healthcare, pensions, retirement. These things have gone away, and the only people that are able to do so, who attain those type of positions now, are the top of their class. You know, the top maybe 10% of their class. It just goes to the fact that there's just not as much opportunity out there as there used to be. Um, and people have to work twice as hard nowadays. And there's so much bureaucracy and um, clogged arteries in the government now. That's the cost of everything has gone up, and that's a pattern throughout history. That's the way it's been for a long time with every nation. And what you're seeing now is just a reemergence of that pattern in economics and institutions. So, and with the destruction of the family, the destruction of marriage in whole, that's come across the lower middle class, is proof of a destabilized economy. So, again, in 1960, if you would have been unmarried, if you would have been a male in your prime and you were not married by a certain age, that would have been unheard of in 1960. But nowadays it's just common, and without that incentive, especially for men, without that incentive to strive to, if a man doesn't see a house on the a shiny house on the hill, to strive towards, to attain to, the incentive to work is going to go down. So that's what you're seeing now, with the top 90, top 80% of their class, the white working class and the working class in general are seeing their paychecks go down, their healthcare benefits skyrocketing, the amount of time they have to devote to their job, and the incentive that they get out of it, whether it be family, kids, house, that has gone away in many of the cases. And the only people who really get married nowadays are the upper middle class. The top 10% of their class get married, and actually stay married, and stay married and raise their kids and tell their kids and teach their kids and stuff like that. That's gone away. So would a universal basic income solve a lot of these problems? Well, it would cut the overhead costs, the administrative costs. It would cut the bureaucracy out. If you're 21, you get $10,000 a year, divided by 12 every month into an electronic account. It's not enough to live, but it is enough to where you can't go to the government and complain. You no longer have to rely on the government for food stamps, for this and that, for housing. They can, now there's no excuse. Now you have income coming in. Now it's not going to be enough to live, but say you get a job making $11, $12 an hour, making $25,000 a year, then the tip plus the 10,000, then that kind of kickstarts your life, and you can make a life out of that, because $25,000 a year is not a lot of money, and it's really hard to make it $25,000 a year. But $35,000 a year, it's a lot easier. See what I'm saying? So if everybody at the age of 21 had a universal basic income of $10,000, the excuse, that would cut the excuse of the welfare state out. And you could get a job, you could join the army, you could go to college, you could pay for it using your universal basic income, and you could get a job making, say, $25,000 a year. Then that would, and you could find a partner, make the same amount, and you guys could build a life. See, that's another thing that's we're in a transitional period to where people are going to have to start relying on each other. The lower working class, they have to be the ones that start following the upper middle class, because right now they're not. They're the ones who are going to have to find a partner, because they're not going to be able to make it on their own anymore. So they're going to have to find a partner, and they're not going to have a choice, because they're not going to have anywhere to live, because you can't live on $25,000 a year. You're going to have to find a partner who makes $25,000 a year, and you're going to have to make it work. And so I think a universal basic income would help a lot of that and would actually save money in the long run. Now, whether you guys agree with me or not, that's another story. And there's all kinds of different reasons why you may disagree. But a universal basic income given to every U.S. citizen at the age of 21 of $10,000 a year in their checking accounts would cut overhead costs, would cut bureaucracy out, because there wouldn't be any administrator. You wouldn't have to pay an administrator to go over all the details of your food stamps, of your housing, and stuff like that. Here's your universal basic income. You get what you get. You're on your own. You have no excuse now. It's there. Okay? That's it. And that would cut out the bureaucracy of having a nanny state, of having a socialized state. It would also discourage bad behavior, whereas the current system incentivizes bad behavior. So if you make more than the poverty line, you'll lose access. You'll lose access to the nanny state. So if you get a job and where you're making $13 an hour, you're no longer above the poverty or below the poverty line. And so that incentive to not work would disappear with universal basic income. Right now, the way the government is set up, it discourages people to lift themselves out of poverty, because if you go get a job making $13 an hour, you lose all your benefits from the nanny state. So in a strange way, the government incentivizes bad behavior. And so, like a woman who is divorced, or a woman who is raising a child and gets all kinds of benefits, would no longer have to worry about, well, should I date him? He doesn't make a lot of money. I'm not going to date him because or I'm not going to move in with him because for fear of losing my benefits. That would go away. And so the people, the woman would then go seek the man without worrying about, well, I don't want to lose my benefits. There's all kinds of stuff that would go away with a universal basic income. And we're in need of it, guys. We are at a point in society where, the country's crumbling. The country's really, and in fact, I think the country's in worse shape than what you're led to believe. That's my honest outcome. Look at your grandparents and look at your generation. The difference is just astounding. In 1960, there was an upper class, but rarely did the upper class, unless you were in Manhattan, unless you were some kind of bigwig that lived in Manhattan or Los Angeles or something, the upper middle class rarely bought Mercedes, rarely bought BMWs, not because they didn't have the money, but because they didn't want to show off. That wasn't the cool thing to do in 1960. So the owners and the managers and the chairmans and the different big top positions, the upper class wouldn't build a 14,000 square foot house. Not because they couldn't, but because they didn't want to show off. It wasn't cool to show off like that back then. 1960. Fast forward to 2010. Well, now it's cool to show off. If you make a lot of money, show it off. If you can afford to build a 14,000 square foot house, build a 14,000 square foot house. If you can afford a Mercedes Benz, buy a Mercedes Benz. If you can afford a BMW, buy a BMW. These were taboo in 1960. And a lot of the reasons is because first generation, upper middle class, I think there was a large majority who didn't go to college. So in 1960, if you were an owner of a company, there was a 50% chance that you didn't have a master's degree or you weren't educated. You had worked your way up. Your father had built a company. You were drafted in by your father, and but you came. Your roots were with the working class still, because that's where your roots were. And so you didn't show off. You didn't buy a Mercedes. Even if you could afford it, you wouldn't do that. 2010, fast forward to 2010. Culture has changed completely. And this is with the new generation, in which many people in the upper class, in the upper crust of society, have never known anything but. So their parents were upper class. They are upper class. Not saying that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying the culture in itself has changed to where in 1960, if you were upper class, you were upper class, but you took a great deal of humility in knowing you were upper class. You were humble in knowing you were upper class. You didn't show off. You may have been able to afford a Mercedes. You may have been able to afford a BMW, but you did not drive one out of fear of being called out, out of fear of being scorned by the community. So you didn't want to buy a Mercedes. You wanted to fit in with everybody else. And so fast forward to 2010 and how much the culture has changed. Something will need to be done, because we're losing our country. We're losing individual expression, which is what the Constitution was founded on: individual freedom, individual liberty. We are no longer looked at individually. We are put into groups now. And that is the classic sign of communism, of socialism. I identify by my group. I identify by my race. I identify by my gender. That was not what the Constitution was about. The Constitution was about individual liberties, individual rights. We are saying to vast numbers of young people that you identify by your group, you identify by your race, and that's who you are. The hell with individual liberties. If you're a white male, you're a white male. If you're a black female, you're a black female. You need to identify by your group. That's what we're telling people. And that's a classic sign of communism. That's a classic sign of socialism. To where our founders who founded the Constitution did not identify themselves by groups, but they put it in the Constitution, individual liberty. That's why they put it in there. The Constitution really is a genius document. they recognized communism and they wanted to get away from it. And they used the free market. Okay, the free market to enrich individuals out of poverty. Well, the free market's been hijacked. The free market has been hijacked. We don't have a free market anymore. The free market has been hijacked by the government, by institutions. And that's why I get mad when conservatives talk to me about capitalism as if it still existed. It doesn't exist. The free market has long collapsed. And that's why I'm saying we don't necessarily live in the same capitalist society that we were built upon. So I get frustrated with conservatives who believe that the free market is free and who believe lowering taxes on corporations is going to do anything. At the same time, the Democrats are even worse. The Democrats' ideas are just ridiculous. So I don't identify with neither party at this stage in the game. I identify with libertarian common sense ideas. So, because the free market is not free anymore. Used to be you could set up a stand, do some blacksmith work. Now, this is obviously long ago. You could set up a stand without licenses, without degrees, without all this state crap without all this bureaucracy that you have to go through in order to start a business. The free market was setting up a stand and selling wrought iron. The free market was going out on the street selling t-shirts. That was originally the free market. Not to say we can't still do that, but if you want to start a small business, the amount of bureaucracy that you have to go to and the amount of legal crap that you have to go through is a classic sign of a dying society. The arteries are clogged. That's how it is every nation when they fail. That's what you're seeing. In 1960, if you would have told me, if you would see in 1960 that 52% of middle-class men were not married and had children out of wedlock, that would have been unheard of in 1960. That's not too uncommon nowadays. And the reason is now it is sometimes the fault of the man. So I'm not saying that it's anybody else's fault. It is their fault, but it is also a product of uncertainty in the future. It's uncertainty because the benefits are not there. We're asking our young people to pay for the health care of the older generation. So the young people don't want to work because they realize there's little incentive for them to go out there and work because the poverty line's at $20,000. And if they go get a $13 an hour job, it puts them over the poverty line. So what's the incentive? There's no incentive. If there's no shiny house on the hill to go to, there's no incentive. That's the classic sign of a dying society. So I ask my Democratic friends, my communist friends, look at Venezuela. I have to remind them of all the power that gets concentrated, you know, and even though that power for the moment may be pleasant, their kids might not be as pleasant. So the people in power may be nice. You may say they're nice and they're giving, they're upstanding, they have integrity, but their kids might not be. You don't know who will get the power after that. So I don't think communism and I don't think socialism is a good idea to run a society. I just don't. This is a libertarian idea. Universal basic income is a very libertarian idea. It's simple. At the age of 21, you will get $10,000 a year divided by 12, deposit it into your account. There it is. You're free to go as you please. But don't complain to me. Don't complain to the government because we can't help you anymore. That would save the country from the destructive path it's gone down. When everybody's in debt, like George Bush and Barack Obama pushed on us, when everybody is in this much debt, the individual has little incentive to look forward because that shiny house on the hill is getting dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. And so when there's no shiny house on the hill to go to, the incentive diminishes. And that's where we're at as a society, the majority. There's little incentive for anybody to go out there because the amount of taxes that's taken and what that tax money is then being spent on should be a disgrace, is abominable. And so people realize this. So if you go get a job, a quarter of your money or a half of your money is going towards taxes. Those taxes are then getting funneled through a bureaucracy and handed back out. And, you know, the incentive goes away. That's where we're at today. That's what's changed from 1960. So the incentive to work hard, the notion that if you work hard, you're going to get somewhere, that was the American dream. The American dream was if you worked hard, you bettered yourself, you would eventually make enough money to raise a family, to have kids, to pay off your house. That was the American dream. And that, we're losing that. If not, I think we've already lost it. That's my personal belief. I believe we've already lost it. You know, and the amount of debt that's being pushed on our kids, it's being pushed on the young people. The incentive to work hard is not there anymore. And my point of view is the working class. You know, that's the viewpoint that I come from. That's my perception, is that if you work hard, you better yourself, you do the best you can, you will achieve greatness, you will have a family, you will have kids, your life will be better if you work hard. That incentive is gone. I mean, that incentive's not there. And I'm talking about the working class because the working class has been destroyed. The working class used to be in 1960. The working class worked at a plant. You could work at a plant and, you know, making automobile parts, making, products, paper products, plastic products were popular. And, you could save up enough money eventually to buy a house. You might drive a Ford or a Chevy or something, but you did okay. Your spouse or your partner, you would work. You'd make enough money, you'd get by, and you'd even have a little bit of retirement. Fast forward to 2010. Many of these plants have closed. The plants that do remain open are being operated by outsourced labor, by third-party laborers who don't get benefits or temp jobs. And the working class has been really just affected by this more than any other class of people. And so it blows my mind when I hear somebody from the upper crust talking about Trump this and Trump that. Because the truth is their class is not affected. Their class is doing better than ever. But then they want to go on TV and berate Trump and try to destroy the voters and call them demoralized. Well, the reason they're demoralized is because their jobs have left. They are the class of people who are affected, not the upper crust. So it just blows my mind when I hear these people talking about Trump this, Trump that. They hate Trump. They hate the voters. What did Hillary call the deplorables? Hillary got up there and, with her Yale college background or her condescending tone, got up there and called Trump supporters deplorable. That really stuck out in my mind. And I'm thinking, that is why Trump got elected. So the white working class really has been destroyed. And we have really dug ourselves in a hole. The corruption is the arteries are clogged. And I'm afraid things are going to have to change through a collapse, a financial collapse. I think something eventually is gonna happen. A revolution, maybe. But when a nation's arteries get clogged up and there's too much bureaucracy and the government starts failing, then you just have civil unrest. And I think postmodernism, we're living in a postmodern society, and the effects will be felt for a long time. So universal basic income, I think that would help a lot. I think that would incentivize people to not live below the poverty line. I think it's needed. It would also discourage bad behavior, whereas the current system incentivizes bad behavior. So if you get a $13 an hour job, you're suddenly above the poverty line, so you don't get no benefits, but yet you're working and you may be taking heat from your boss. You can't afford a place on your own with a car. So the incentive is not there to do that. And I think a universal basic income would give people more of an incentive to do these things And it would also incentivize people to get married and stay married. Because for the women, the lower class women, if they would find a partner, they could bring their income together. And so it would also incentivize people to get married in the lower class. See, the lower class really has been affected. Single parents in the just destruction of the education systems that are in these poor neighborhoods has really just hurt every sector of the economy. And I think if we changed that, if we incentivized people in the lower class to get married, to stay married, to raise kids, to have kids, and to stay together as a family without discouragement to do so through incentives like the government is doing currently, discouraging young mothers, young single mothers to have kids. The current system discourages young single mothers to get married. Because if they get married to somebody, they lose their benefits from the state. So this would incentivize good behavior rather than discourage good behavior. Rather than incentivize bad behavior, this would discourage bad behavior. So that's my take on it. I'm probably due to leave here soon, so I'll try to make another video soon. Thank you.